I'm thrilled to be starting this series called Hope Has a Name. Each week we'll be looking at Isaiah 9:6 and just looking at some of the different names of Jesus given in this familiar prophecy that centers around Christmas. But before we dive into the scriptures, I have a Christmas survey, okay? And I need your participation. So just raise your hand if how many of you are done with your Christmas shopping already? Anybody? Anybody done? Okay, all right, okay. How many of you hate the people with their hands raised? Okay, all right, okay, all right. Let's just get it out all on the table, right? Okay, all right. I'm just kidding. We love you guys. Kind of. All right. How many of you have ever re-gifted a gift at Christmas? All right. Re-gifted something. Okay. How many of you, and when you re-gifted that gift, it was within the same Christmas season? Okay. You get one, you get something on Monday, you wrap it back up, and you give it to somebody else on Tuesday, right? Just confession time. It's good for the soul. Okay. Good for the soul. All right. Good job. All right. You don't raise your hand on this, but I just have to ask this. How many of you are nervous about seeing family over the holidays, right? Okay. How many of you get reminded every Christmas that your family could really be a good candidate for the Jerry Springer show? Right? Okay. Here's a thought. Maybe they're nervous about seeing you too, right? Okay. How many of you will spend more online? You can raise your hand on this, but how many of you will spend more online this year than you will at physical stores? Okay. All right. All right. How many of you started shopping on Black Friday and ended up buying a bunch of stuff for yourself as well? Okay. All right. How many of it was more stuff for yourself than for others? Anybody? Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. And final question, how many of you have a gift that you're really excited about giving to somebody this Christmas? You're like, man, this is awesome. They're going to love this. Okay. Fantastic. All right. Good stuff. Thank you guys for participating. Christmas it's a time where we think about gifts. And this series, Hope Has a Name, it's about God's great gift to us. It comes from one of the most famous prophecies about the Savior in the Bible. It was made 700 years before the birth of Jesus. And I know Bob just read it a minute ago, but I want to read it again this morning. Here's the prophecy. It really is, it starts in chapter 7, verse 14. It says, "Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel." And then Isaiah 9:6, "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given. And the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." Okay, those are great Christmas verses, and a lot of times even in the video that was shown, you know, some of those verses were popping up there, and it's nativity scene and nice and beautiful, and you see Christmas lights and sparkle, and that's awesome. But when these verses were first spoken, it was to a guy named King Ahaz. And he was a leader, a king of Israel, and there was an Assyrian army, an enemy army that was growing stronger, and they were gobbling up more and more little nations, and they were growing stronger. Their armies were just forces to be reckoned with. Everybody was scared. So the smaller nations, they were coming to this king, and they were saying, "Hey, unite with us, because if we don't take out Assyria, man, we're all goners." And the problem was King Ahaz had disobediently already made a secret treaty with Assyria. So he had entered into partnership, but now he was growing suspicious, and he's like, is Assyria going to turn their backs on us? Are they going to go against the treaty. It's like doing a deal with a mob, right? Okay? You're like, man, okay, I'm scared to not do it, but scared to do it because you're like, what do I do? This is where King Ahaz found himself. This Assyrian army was growing stronger, and he knew if they backed out on the treaty, which he was suspicious of them doing, he knew they were goners. So Isaiah comes to King Ahaz with a message from God. And that message is, put your trust in God instead of trying to manipulate your circumstances. See, it's in the midst of turmoil, enemies surrounding, in the midst of this crisis of faith. Ahaz is like, what do I do? Do I continue trying to manipulate the circumstances and use my knowledge and use this business book that I just read and this podcast that I just listened to and try to figure out how to manipulate everything to work out? Or do I put my trust ultimately in God? See, it's in the midst of this crisis of faith that God gives the promise of the coming Messiah. Let's read Isaiah 9:6 again. It says this, for to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. See, there's 4 names found in this verse for Jesus, the coming Messiah. And the first one is Wonderful Counselor. It means this, that he has the wisdom to rule in justice and for our good. Mighty God, he has the power to execute his wise plans. So he knows what is best, and he has the power to carry it out. Right? Everlasting Father. His purposes and rule are eternal in nature. It's everlasting. It's not just in the here and now. And then the Prince of Peace. The end result will be perfect restoration and healing. In the midst of our chaos, in the midst of our brokenness, in the midst of our frustration and being overwhelmed and all of that stuff, the Prince of Peace comes. His goal is to restore and to heal our broken lives. This is Christmas at its core.
Amen.
God with us. That's what the name Emmanuel means. I want you to see and experience and truly feel on a heart level that hope has a name. His name is Jesus. This prophecy was given 700 years before Jesus was born, and it points to his birth, but then also to his future reign eternally. And we're kind of stuck in between. We're in the in-between. And so we're seeing this hope and we're seeing this restoration, but it's not perfected yet. But we can have hope in knowing that he will carry it out and how it applies to our lives even now. So let's dive into the first name given in this verse, and this is what we'll focus in on this week. Is the first name that's given is Wonderful Counselor. Wonderful Counselor. And here's the big idea. I know in your Graceway Weekly, the big idea is written that Jesus provides wisdom, perfect wisdom, and so much more. I'm going to change that. Okay? I'm going to change that. It's really the same idea, but this I think gets a little more to the heart of it. Wisdom is transformation, not just information. Wisdom is transformation, not just information. And we'll see how Jesus carries that out, how he's that source of that perfect wisdom that transforms us from the inside out. But let's dive into the first point. Jesus, the Wonderful Counselor, is the source of perfect wisdom. See, a counselor is someone we go to when we need wisdom, right? When we feel lost, right? You ever been lost and driving around? You go and you find somebody that looks that probably haven't done this. Now that I'm thinking about it, I haven't done this in years because we just asked Siri, right? Okay, but in the olden days, In the olden days, I won't say that, we used to drive up and we would ask somebody that was walking down the road or somebody, out of our life, hey, do you live around here? How do we get there? And they would give us a series, and I'm like, I'm never going to remember that, but I'll try to get there and all of that. When you're lost, you go to someone for directions. When you don't know what to do, you go to someone for advice. That's a counselor. It's a counselor. Jesus is the wonderful counselor. Wonderful means it's beyond description. I'll put it this way. It's more awesomer than awesome.
Amen.
Okay?
Amen.
Very deep and theological right there. More awesomer than awesome. But it's so true. It carries that idea of being struck by awe, not knowing what to do, carrying the idea of being speechless. See, Jesus is the wonderful counselor. It points to his deity. What does that mean, deity? It means that he's God. That he's God in his nature. Well, let's look at Isaiah 40, 13 and 14. Let's read that, okay? Write this down, this reference. Man, what an awesome verse. It talks about the wisdom of God. It says this, who has measured the Spirit of the Lord? Or what man shows him his counsel? Whom did he consult, and who made him understand? Who taught him the path of justice, and taught him knowledge, and showed him the way of understanding? Okay, what does that mean? It simply means this. Do you know that God has never Googled anything?
Amen.
Right? He's never Googled anything. He's never, have you ever been to that point in your life where he's just like, I can't make another decision ever, right? You're just overwhelmed. You're like, I have no idea what to do. And you're like, it's this nervousness, it's this panic. You have to stop and think, and when you do, you can't. God's never done that, not even for a second.
Amen.
He's never even like, what's the name of that? What's the name of that song? What's the name of that store that I need to get to? He's never stood in a grocery store aisle and thought, okay, Honey Nut Cheerios, oatmeal, there's something else. Never had that experience.
That's right.
He is the source of, he's got it, all the wisdom. Isaiah 40:13 says, no one taught him anything. He's never had to go to people for advice. He's never had to look up a how-to video on YouTube.
Yep.
Right? I honestly, I can't have a 10-minute conversation without asking Siri something. You're having a conversation, and then all of a sudden you're like, hey Siri, who won the World Series in 1990? Anybody know that? Alright, okay, alright. I chose that on purpose. That's right, Barry Larkin, Eric Davis, oh man, good stuff right there. So, I mean, you're just constantly asking Siri stuff. Hey Siri, how many ounces are in a cup? Hey Siri, how do I grill salmon? Hey Siri, take me to this place. Because we're always, we don't have it all up here, right? We don't. God does.
Amen.
God does. James 1:5. Not only does God have all wisdom, but James 1:5 says that we can go to God and we can ask him for wisdom. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. See, we can go to God. He is the source of perfect wisdom. He's the source of perfect wisdom because he set the world up to work a certain way. Right? There's certain predictability about this world. We call it consequences, right? How the world functions. Decisions that are made lead us down a path. The Bible calls this the concept of sowing and reaping. You know, decisions that we make today send us down a path. And I'm not talking about like in a fatalistic, you know, if I hit my snooze button one too many times, my life is going to unravel because I missed this person that I was supposed to talk to in Starbucks, and they were going to give me, they were going to offer me a job, and now, you know, and I'm not talking about like in a fatalistic way. I'm just saying the decisions that we're making today are setting our lives in a direction. God set it up this way.
That's right.
I was reading a great book by Andy Stanley, and I wouldn't recommend all of his books, but this is a great book. It's called The Principle of the Path, and he says this: direction, not intention, determines destination. You know, as I thought about this, I flashed back to a time early on in our marriage, and Tiff and I were heading to my family who lives in Baltimore for Christmas. And we were traveling through the night. This was before we had kids, and we were just traveling through, and we were supposed to take 79 South to 68 East or something like that. I can't remember. But we took 79 South, and we forgot to take the 68 East. And so we kept taking 79 South. It was the middle of the night, and we drove like an hour in the wrong direction, right? Just kept going south. We were supposed to be heading to Baltimore. We were heading towards Tennessee, all right? Our intentions were to go to Baltimore, but our direction was taking us to Tennessee. You see, sometimes we think that, okay, my heart is to get this way. My heart is to live for God, but we don't put our feet in that direction, right? We kind of just think that somehow it's going to automatically happen. But see, God sees the entire road, and He's given us wisdom through His Word that guides us in this life. It sets our direction. He's the source of perfect wisdom. But there's something else about a counselor that points to the heart of why Jesus was born on that first Christmas. Jesus, and this is the second thing I want you to see, Jesus as the wonderful counselor, He steps into our brokenness. So He's the source of wisdom as the counselor. But a counselor, right? A counselor steps into a certain brokenness. Isaiah 9:1 says this: "But there will be no gloom for her who is in anguish. In the former time He brought into contempt the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, but in the latter time He has made glorious the way of the sea," or these areas. He's saying that these lands, these areas experienced the most devastation in this war. See, the Assyrian army, who King Ahaz was scared would attack, they ended up doing it. And they came through the land of Naphtali and the land of Zebulun. And they experienced the most devastation. But here's what's cool. In Matthew chapter 4, you don't have to turn there. In Matthew chapter 4, I believe, verse 12 through 16, guess what? Jesus begins His ministry at that same place. When He is starting His earthly ministry, He's going to the place of where there had been the most devastation, where there was the most gloom, where there was this most sense of loss. Jesus begins His ministry. He's stepping into our brokenness. Isn't that just like Jesus?
Man.
Isn't that just, would you expect anything different? Right? Let's think about this. He experienced our broken world. He is the great provider, but yet He experienced hunger. He is the great healer, yet He endured pain and sickness. He is the source of all hope, but He went through great disappointment. He runs the universe in perfect order, but He felt the early morning chaos of getting ready for church and not being able to find His sandals. Man, Jesus steps into our brokenness. He's the king of the universe, but yet he was born a poor man. He was born into a nation that was run by somebody else, by a foreign country, by the Roman Empire. They were oppressed. He was born in a barn. The king of the universe, born in a barn. And his family was so poor that in their church, in the sacrificial system of their day, they would make an exception. The kind of the rule, the guideline was each family had to sacrifice a lamb each year. But they made an exception for families who couldn't afford that lamb. Said you can offer a pigeon instead, much cheaper. Guess what? Jesus' family offered a pigeon. We're poor. The king of the universe. Born into a poor family. Let's go back to James 1:5. It says this: if we lack wisdom, let us ask God, who gives generously to all. Get that next phrase, without reproach. See, Jesus doesn't have that "I told you so" attitude. You know, as the counselor, there are times when he says, "Whoa, whoa, not good, not good, don't go down that path." He gives us warnings through God's word. And guess what? Sometimes what we do, we walk right past it, right? And we walk right past it. And God continues to say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa," and we continue to walk right past it. And then we find ourselves in a place of brokenness. We find ourselves just like we were heading that direction. It always leads to a destination. And that place, God tried to tell us, hey, that's not good. But we walk there anyway. And then when we go to God and we just say, God, I've messed up big time. I've failed you. I haven't trusted you. He doesn't say, well, oh man, that's 10. That's the 40th time today. What is it this time? He gives without reproach. He welcomes us. He steps into our brokenness to heal us. This doesn't mean the consequences of our choices simply vanish, right? No, they're consequences. They're real consequences, right? Our credit card debt, our credit card company doesn't misplace our account and like accidentally wipe out our the tab that we've been racking up for years. It doesn't do that. The relationships that we've wounded through our words and our actions, they're not healed instantly. But guess what? When we realize and we come to God, He says, I will give you wisdom, and I will give you that wisdom without reproach. I will step into your brokenness, and I will be with you. You know what? When we missed that turn driving to Baltimore, and we drove an hour and missed our exit, an hour past our exit, when we realized it, we weren't magically transported back to the right exit, right? What did we have to do? We had to do a U-turn, and we had to drive that hour back. It was the worst hour driving in my life, right? But we were heading back to the right course. And see, when Jesus meets us in our brokenness, He says, yeah, there are consequences, and there's things that because of choices that are hard. But guess what? He'll be with us. He'll be with us for the journey. He picks us up and He carries us and He brings us back to the right path. But you know what? We need more. We need more than wisdom. We need more than comfort and encouragement. We need a radical transformation from the inside out. See, this is why I say wisdom is transformation, not just information. And the key to receiving that transformation is submission, not education. So that's where we're going with this third and final point about the wonderful counselor. That Jesus, the wonderful counselor, He changes us from the inside out. See, James 1:5, once again, when we go and we ask God for wisdom, He gives it to us without reproach, but it says He gives it to us generously. He gives it overflowing. He gives more than wisdom. He gives power. He transforms. How does He do this? By giving Himself. See, that gift, that first Christmas, was God giving Himself. God with us. God walking this world among us, living a perfect life for us, dying a death for our forgiveness. He's giving of Himself. 1 Corinthians 1:30, great verse to write down. It says this, and because of Him, you are in Christ Jesus, who became to us wisdom from God, righteousness, sanctification, and redemption. See, Jesus didn't just, when we needed wisdom, when we lacked wisdom, Jesus didn't just send us an email filled with wisdom, because wisdom is more than information, it's transformation. It says that Jesus came down to this earth and He became wisdom for us. See, we need more than wisdom, because honestly, let's just be honest, right? Often we know what is wise, but we choose foolishness anyway, right? I'll explain it this way. Head versus heart, right? Head thinking with wisdom, heart thinking with emotions, right? Okay, head, that's when you choose wisely, you consider the consequences, you evaluate. Heart, we often choose with our heart. Decisions are made oftentimes in emotional circumstances, right? Let me just give you a scenario. Okay, this is completely fictional, but maybe you can relate. Okay, going in to buy a used car, right? Man, you've been thinking with your head, you've determined your budget, you've been tracking your finances, you've set a limit, and you're like, man, I am not going to spend a dime, I am not going to spend a dime over $10,000 or whatever. Whatever, you have a limit there. The number doesn't matter, right? I'm not spending a dime over that. So you're in the parking lot looking at the used cars or the pre-owned cars, and you're looking and you find a reasonable car. You go back and you've looked at consumer reports, and you know kind of what you want and all of that. You go and you're talking to the salesman, and as you're going, he says, hey, let's go fill out some paperwork or whatever, and you can take it for a test drive. And you walk into that showroom, and there, in all her glory, a brand new, shiny SUV, up on a pedestal, spotlights coming down. It's just slowly rotating so you can see the entire car, and you're like, oh man. And your heart thinks, I want that. I want that. And at that moment, the salesman knows he's got you hooked. And he says, I could get you in this beauty right here, all right? I would not make a good car salesman, because I would automatically revert to that voice every time in talking with people. I can get you into this beauty right here for just a few more dollars than that piece of junk out there on the used car lot, right? And your heart's kind of already made that decision, right? He's already got you hooked, and then he's just reeling 0% financing for the next 118 months, and you're like, yeah. And so your heart's made this emotional decision because you're like, I want that. Your head's been saying, hey, I have a budget, this is what is within my means, but your heart says, I want that. And so once your heart says, man, I want that, then your head gets a new job. And that job is to rationalize the decision that your heart's already made. Right? And you start thinking, you come up, well, better gas mileage, this one gets 27 miles to the gallon, and that one only gets 14, or I'm just throwing out numbers, whatever. And you're like, I could save money, and you you'd have to drive like 750,000 miles to make up for the difference in price. But your heart's already made the decision, right? So your head in this new job, it's already rationalizing this decision. I'll be able to talk to my wife more, you know, she'll tell her that I love her because now my phone can connect and the Bluetooth speakers, and I just really, really need that. Right? We've anybody ever experienced that? Maybe not with a car or whatever, but we've done it, right? We've done it. Here's the point that I'm trying to make with this illustration. We are masters at deceiving ourselves.
Amen.
This is why wisdom needs to be more than just information.
Amen.
Because we'll take that information, we'll twist it. This is why wisdom needs to be transformation. See, the Bible speaks to this. Jeremiah 17:9 says it this way. The heart is deceitful above all things, desperately sick. Who can understand it? See, we know, the wise thing when it comes to work ethic and how hard work pays off, but we tend to slack off, right? We know credit card debt can be crippling and spending habits will put you in a bad spot, or we know, that this relationship, man, it's probably not a good idea, but we go for it anyway. We know there are decisions that lead down a wrong path, but we become masters at deceiving ourselves. You want to know how we know that those roads end up somewhere that we don't want to end up? Because we can see it in other people's lives, right? They get in a messed up relationship, and maybe you say something, nah, I'm not so sure, but you're kind of nervous, and then it goes, a certain length of time, and it ends up really badly, and you're like, you don't say it to your friend, but you're in the back of your mind, you're like, I knew it. I knew that guy was a scumbag. Right? But somehow we can't seem to see it in our own lives because we have this heart that's deceitful. Right? We think that we're the exception to the rule. We think, oh, I can get away with it. I know it's probably not great, but I'm just the exception. Right? We're not the exception to the rule.
Amen.
We will eventually end up where we are heading, no matter if we intended to go there or not.
Amen.
Jeremiah 17:9 says the heart is deceitful. Okay? Think about this, right? There's a difference between being dishonest and deceitful. Now, obviously, the two are related. But you've had these, if you're a parent, you probably had your kid tell you a lie, right? Like this kid is right now telling their mom, no, I did not eat the chocolate bar, right? And every parent knows, right? Every parent knows, okay? They're being dishonest, but they're not being deceitful, right? Because you see right through it. See, the Bible, in describing our heart, it uses the word deceitful. Because not only is it dishonest, but it has that ability to trick us. It has that ability to trick us. And this is why we need a new heart. A new heart that's being transformed, that craves a relationship with God, that wants to please Him, that longs to trust Him. See, if wisdom is transformation, not just information, then the key to getting that wisdom is submission, not education. Not learning more facts about God, although that's important. But it's more than that, it's transformation. It's saying, God, whatever you say, I will do. James 1:5. We've talked about it a lot today. Going to God, asking Him for wisdom, how He gives it to us generously, how He gives it to us without reproach. But the next two verses calls us to do what God says. See, God is the perfect source of wisdom, and we can go to Him and we can ask Him and we can pray and we can seek guidance and we can find wisdom in His Word. And then it says, but do it. The double-minded, it says the double-minded, the person that kind of wavers back and forth and just says, I'm gonna listen and say, yeah, that's right, and then go do something else. James says, does that guy think he's gonna get wisdom from God? Because he's just tricking himself. See, the key to getting wisdom is submitting to what God says. Knowing that He is the perfect, the wonderful counselor. That He is the perfect source of wisdom. That He wants what is best for us. Put it this way. Writing a blank check. Right? Signing your name, but not putting the amount in or whatever and giving it to someone. It's saying you have full access to my bank account. Right? And I know nobody writes checks anymore. I do sometimes, but that idea, are you ready to lay down all your preferences to follow Jesus anywhere? See, this is your moment of truth. This is, you'll never experience the wisdom and restoration of the wonderful counselor unless you say, God, here I am. God, I'm willing to follow you wherever. See, Jesus will give you all of Himself, all of eternity, all of His power and grace, but that comes through surrender. That comes through submission, obedience to Him. That first step of faith of saying, God, I give it all to you, is personal faith in Jesus as Savior. So we talk about 3 circles. We've been trained to share our faith in 3 circles, and I have a little bracelet up here, and it has these 3 circles, and it points out when we find ourselves in brokenness that God comes with the gospel. That's Jesus came, He died, and He rose again. That's what the gospel is. But how do you get from brokenness to the gospel? Repent. Okay? That means surrender. Say, God, I give up. God, I want to try things your way. And I'm going to believe, I'm going to put my faith in you. I'm going to trust you. That comes first and foremost in trusting that Jesus died on the cross for you. So that we won't have to barter with God. We won't have to say, but God, I went to church this many times, and I did this, and I stopped cussing, and I stopped doing this, and I'm good. Like, I coach my son's Little League baseball team, and I'm a good guy. I'm a religious guy. It doesn't really work with God. What works with God is saying, God, I'm sinful, and I need you to forgive me. I have ignored how you have laid out this path for me. I have stepped right past it. I've walked right past the warning signs. And I've done it because I wanted my own way. But God, I'm surrendering that to you. I'm repenting. I'm turning around. I'm saying, God, I give it all to you. Whatever you want, God. Whatever you want. Maybe you've already placed your personal faith in Jesus as Savior. So let me ask you this question. Christian, what are you holding on to? What path are you heading down that you know isn't quite right? Will you surrender and return to the wonderful counselor for wisdom and restoration in this area?